You're listening to the Valley Current.
Okay, welcome into the Valley Current. We're here in the radio booth right in Silicon Valley, downtown Palo Alto, 1 block from the major Apple store, which I laugh because now they've posted a police car in front of the store because so many people just go in the store apparently and rob the stuff off the table. What's happening in Silicon Valley? I was like, this never happened years ago. It's scary, and I'm lucky to have with me Dr. Philippe Bouissou, who's been a friend for many, many decades. And you just finished a book that you've given me a copy of, which you've told me about before, called Aligning the Dots, which I read the preview on Amazon. I was like, wow, this is the best marketing. Did you write that?
I did, yes.
I was like, this guy knows how to do marketing. I always thought of you as more of a management consultant, but I guess you really know marketing inside out.
And I think people should get information before they decide to buy the book. They should know what it is about and make sure that this is the kind of book that they want to read.
Yes. So tell me a little bit about your journey to decide to do the book, because I always thought of you back in the days of Apple as, hey, you're kind of working with Steve Jobs and designing products and making things work, and there's failures, there's successes. The company just hit, I think, $1.4 trillion. I was like, wow, what would our stake, because my old firm started Apple Computer. We created the corporation, and we passed on the stock. We were like,
you're not the only one. So
and I laugh because, there still are a few partners alive, knock on wood. They're all getting to be in their 80s, and they're like, yeah, that wasn't a very good decision. They're like, we would have been billionaires.
Right.
But back in those days, 2 guys walk in, they smell bad, they look bad, they have this, breadboard of a product. It's not really working yet. They don't have any money. They don't really have any funder. This was before Mike Markkula signed the guarantee. People don't know the whole story. It's never really been written about. But the short answer is you've turned all of this knowledge into kind of a formula for how to improve the way to think about growing and aligning a company and its ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, there are very few people that really think in that sort of theoretical way and practical way. Mm-hmm. So how did that occur to you?
The first thing is that I realized that growth is everything. I mean, if I look at a company and I can only ask to the CEO one single number that would give me a sense on how the company is doing.
Yes.
The number I would ask would be how fast is growing your company compared to the market growth in which you are.
Compared to the market growth.
Yeah, because if you're growing at 50% in a market that's growing at 200%, then you're losing market share. You don't want to do that. But if you're growing at 50% in a market that's growing at 10%, then you're on a path to becoming one of the leading companies in that market.
Right. I have to say this is so relevant. I'm on the board of a company. It'll stay nameless. It's done really well. We've raised 2 or 3 rounds of venture capital, 200 employees, 12 offices. They're doing really well. But the VCs are like, you're not growing fast enough.
Yes.
And the CEO is like, what? And he's like, we're like 30%. He says, you got to meet the 40. You ever hear this rule of 40%?
Yeah.
Like, you got to hear this magic 40%, and you're not quite there. And, of course, the guy is killing himself. His team is killing himself. And he's like, why aren't you guys happy?
Right. So I have actually a section in the book that says growing is like drinking. It has to be done responsibly.
Right.
And so growth for the sake of growth, I think, is a bad idea. You know? And the VCs and the PE firms have been trying to really push companies to grow.
Yes.
Forgetting about the unit economics, forgetting about profitability or line to profitability.
Yes.
And I think it's a mistake. I think you have to grow faster than the market.
Faster.
But you cannot grow at any cost, raising hundreds of millions of dollars because you are not on a path to being profitable, which ultimately you need to be if you want to.
So you might criticize WeWork for sure, as an example.
I think that when you pour hundreds of millions of dollars into a business, the valuation is based on a very high growth rate. You have to double or triple the business every year. And that is typically not sustainable. There's not a lot of industries that are mature where you can literally double or triple your growth rate.
But WeWork was a good example because they took a lot of money.
Yeah.
they seemed, optically to grow really, really fast.
Yeah.
And
but they were growing irresponsibly. That's the problem.
But would you say the board of directors was a little bit asleep at the wheel about what's really going on here?
Well, the board is trying to build value for shareholders, and what happens is, as long as they are growing fast, then there is the paper value that's growing before they go public, and so everybody is happy in a way. The problem is that doesn't sustain.
Yes.
At some point, it doesn't sustain. So at some point, something's going to have to give.
Yes.
And the company will be forced to either go out of business or become profitable and self-sufficient.
Yes.
And there's no path to that in a company like WeWork. It's unclear how they would do that.
Right.
And so you have this kind of artificial valuation building exercise through a high growth.
Yes.
That at some point the music's going to stop and then people are going to get hurt.
So they're still alive. I guess SoftBank is behind them, and this show is not about WeWork, but it's about aligning the dots. When you look at these cases, do you try to sort of imagine how do these cases all fit into the paradigm that you call the new paradigm to grow any business with? I want to underscore any, because I think of a law firm as a business these days. Unfortunately, it is. But it's very different than, say, a high-tech company, right? There's really a lot of other moving parts. But you might say, no, it's really customers and profits and, it's all of those things that you can measure, right?
Yeah, I think the real cool idea about the book is that this notion of growth is truly universal. And the fundamental idea is that if you want to grow as fast as you can within a market, you have to align the company with that market. It's the misalignment between the company and its target market that makes the company slow down. A bit like a mechanical watch. If you misalign a gear, you'll start to slow down, and eventually it will stop ticking.
Yes.
And what happens is, regardless of what the company does, where it is, how big it is, the business model, the kinds of customers it's serving, it has to maintain that alignment between the company and the market. And what's remarkable about the book is that there are 4 independent axes of alignment that are truly universal. They apply to any business.
Any business.
So I always like to say there's a very famous cafe in Paris called La Coupole where Sartre used to hang around. And I can take this cafe and use this alignment approach and measure that alignment exactly like I would for Tesla or your business or any other business.
Really?
And it's truly universal.
Okay.
And that's what I think is really powerful about this methodology.
Okay. So tell us about the various axes, the various sort of alignment paths.
Yeah,
north,
so they are
north, south, east, west. Is that the way to think about this?
There are 4 axes. We call them A1 to A4.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you an example to illustrate what they are.
Okay.
So there's a woman in Boston. She lives about 20 miles south of Boston. Her name is Sylvia.
Okay.
And she has a headache, and she goes to a pharmacy, and the pharmacist shows her a stomachache pill.
Yes.
And she's like, well, it's my head that's hurting, not my stomach.
Right.
The pain that she has, which is her head, is not aligned with the claim that the pharmacist is making, which is, I'm going to fix your stomach problem.
Yes.
So the first axis of alignment, the first is that the pain of the customer and the claim that the company is making, those 2 things have to be aligned.
Okay. That makes sense.
The second one is, imagine that the pharmacist doesn't speak English, only speak Korean. And Sylvia has never been to Korea. She doesn't speak one single word of the language. And imagine that the pharmacist explains, now says, I have the right pill for you. It's 99 cents. It'll be gone in 10 minutes. But he says all that in Korean.
Yes.
And she doesn't understand what the pharmacist is saying.
Yes.
She will never buy the pill.
Okay.
Even though it's the perfect product, it's the perfect pill for her headache.
The claim meets the pain, but the communication's bad.
Right. So the message and the perception have to be aligned. The message is the expression of the claim, the way the claim is expressed.
Okay.
And the perception is the way that claim is understood.
Okay.
Those 2 things have to be aligned. That's the second axis of alignment.
Okay. So this is almost like saying, if I'm putting it into sort of my way of thinking, the pain has to be real and the claim has to solve it. That I think of as engineering. the message has to be aligned with the perception. I think of that as marketing.
That's correct.
You have like two departments with the CEO at the top and a CFO managing the money.
Yeah.
And basically that's a company. That's the beginning of a company.
That's exactly right.
You've broken it down to sort of the molecules of how is this supposed to work together.
Yeah, I'm trying to apply a different filter than the traditional way of organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So the third axis now is, imagine now the pharmacist says to Sylvia, says, well, you can get the right pill for your headache, but you have to drive back to Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like 44 miles round trip. And Sylvia says, well, wait a minute, I'm in a pharmacy right now. Why can't I get the pill?
Right.
So that illustrates the third axis, which is that the way the product is sold in the marketplace and the way people want to acquire that product, those two things have to be aligned.
Okay.
So the purchase and the sale, those two mechanisms have to be aligned.
Yes. But that's often solved for software by having like an app store.
It could be an app store. It could be a one-click purchase on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically the process by which you're making the acquisition of the product or the service.
Pretty seamless or almost seamless.
Right.
Like right now I have people that are shocked when they hear, oh, you can buy a car and have like a 7-day return, right?
Yeah.
And, years ago, I tell this story and people cracked up. When I was poor, I was really poor. I drove this very old Peugeot diesel car. It was French. I'm sorry, this is true.
That's very cool.
And the car literally died as I was driving to a client meeting. Literally just died. And I pulled into a car lot. This is a true story. And I walked in and I said, I really need a car. The guy laughed at me and said, I could see that. Is that a French car? It just died. And I said, yeah, what do you have? He said, well, I got this great car. It's in really good shape. It's whatever it was. I think it was an Acura. It was a used Acura. It was in pretty good shape. And he said, I can give you the greatest deal on this. And I could see you're desperate to get going. I should have rented a car. I don't know what I was thinking. And he said, how will you pay for it? And I said, well, I've got a credit card, and it's got like a pretty big line of credit. Back then, $15,000 was a line of credit.
Right.
The guy was like cracking up, it's decades ago. He said, I never sold a car in a credit card before. He said, I don't think I can do that because then I have to change the price. I said, no, you have to give me the price. The guy sold me a car and a credit card. It was shocking. I drove off. I swear it was the fastest transaction in the world. This is decades ago.
It was a perfect alignment.
It was perfect alignment. I had the pain. I needed something. It died right there at that car lot. The guy was there with the credit card machine. My card passed. My wife, when I drove home, just like cracked. She said, what'd you do? I said, what happened to the car? I said, it died. She said, what'd you do? He said, I just left it on the lot. I didn't even think it was worth any trade-in value. So he says, well, what's this Acura? I said, I bought it. She said, how? On a credit card. How are we going to pay for that? It was pretty funny, but the point is that now, decades later, they're doing that. Mm-hmm. They're selling cars like, just give us a credit card and take it for 7 days. And if you don't like it, return it and we'll revise the credit card. That's shocking.
Yeah,
that's happening. Of course, it took a long time for the industry to realize. And of course, Uber happened. And so it's probably getting harder. But now that's sort of an example of the purchase has to sort of be easy.
It's what I call frictionless transactions.
Frictionless.
The transaction is easy. It's what you expect. It's fast. It's efficient.
Right. So what's the fourth one?
So the fourth axis of alignment is actually my favorite one because I stole it out of the Apple playbook. So as you know, Jack, I spent 3 years at Apple.
Yes.
I worked for Steve Jobs for 1 year.
Yes.
And if you ever wonder, that's how I lost my hair.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, that was it.
He accelerated it for sure.
There are 3 lessons I really learned from Steve, and I am still applying them and using them today.
Yes.
The first one is don't be focused. You have to be hyper-focused.
Hyper-focused. Okay.
You have to be extremely focused. And Steve is probably the most focused business person I've ever met in my life.
Okay.
Very, very driven, very focused.
Yes.
The second lesson I learned from Steve was that simplicity, which is what Apple is all about, is really, really, really hard. Mm-hmm. It's not easy.
Yes.
And the third one, which is really the core of the concept between this fourth alignment, is that I realized that there is only one single business on this planet. And what I mean by business is when money is exchanged for goods or services.
Yes.
And that unique business is the manufacturing and the delivery of delight.
Delight, yes. Mm-hmm.
When you acquire a product or a service, just before unpacking that product, using it for the first time, discovering it,
yes,
you have, as a consumer, a certain delight expectation in your head.
Yes.
As you consume that product from discovery all the way to disposal,
right,
that expectation has to be met.
Right.
There cannot be an impedance mismatch between what you expect
right.
and what's delivered. So the alignment has to be between the expected delight and the delivery, what is actually delivered to you.
Right.
And if you do that, then you have a positive experience
yes.
using the product or the
yes.
service. And then, of course, you'll tell other people, and then you will actually
right.
help, growing the business.
So I say this to lawyers, and they look at me like, God, I can't believe you're saying this, but I do. I say, part of what we do in law is a form of entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
I swear, and now you're going to say, but it really sounds wrong, but it's true. The client wants to understand, is the process of working with you going to be joyful and funny and interesting and probing, or is the process going to be like pulling teeth?
Right.
And I tell you, I see this at big firms, we want the client to understand how hard this is mm-hmm. and how painful this is going to be. And I feel like, can we serve these people a decent cup of coffee? I used to say that at my old firm. We used to have like the crappiest coffee. I think they've since improved it a lot, by the way. I probably was the one who caused that. And they said, why? I said, because it's like the only thing tangible we deliver here. And so I say often, clients want to actually experience a bit of joy in understanding what you're going to do. Even if you're in a lawsuit, even if you're dealing with it, they want a sense that, and they look at me like, you're friggin' crazy. I said, do you really think they're looking at footnote 26 of your 40-page brief to figure out how delightful and joyful you were in writing that 2 sentences in that footnote?
Right.
No, they're not. They're not interested. They're more interested in, when we make this argument, what is that one phrase along the lines of what won, arguably, the OJ trial? If the glove don't fit, you must acquit. If you talk to people around the world,
that's all they remember.
That's all they remember.
That's right.
The millions
it's
that
the
was
moment.
spent. And, I've watched this impeachment thing. My wife, she's lovely, let me do it. And she thinks, you're crazy. That's such a waste of time. I'm waiting for that one soundbite. I still have not heard it. Even Dershowitz, who usually has a pretty good, spin on words, it was boring. I was waiting. Is there somebody that's going to give me the glove don't fit? It hasn't happened yet. I'm just waiting for it. I think sooner or later something's going to emerge from all that mire. Maybe Chief Justice Roberts will do it. But there's got to be a moment where you've captured the imagination of whether it's a case, it's a client, it's a business, it's whatever it is.
And that will bring you the delight you expect.
Exactly. People will be like, the one thing I remember, because, I take credit for it, and this is going to sound boastful, but it's true. When people don't know this, Apple had a problem at one point with people copying the Macintosh user interface. Mm-hmm. Even before Microsoft did it. Mm-hmm. Of course, Apple adapted from Xerox. We won't call it copy, but let's just...
They were inspired.
Well, you'll love this. So you'll love the story. I don't think I'm doing anything out of school. So Jobs comes into the office with Wozniak and with... Guy Kawasaki, 3 of them. And they're like, we're really pissed. And at the time, Bill Fenwick is the lead partner, and there's a whole group of people. And of course, Apple's starting to grow, so it looks like a real company.
Right.
These guys at Digital Research Inc., like, who's Digital Research Inc.? A lot of people are like, who is that? Well, it was a company that had something called CPM as an operating system, and they decided to put on top of CPM a crappy version of the Macintosh interface, a really crappy version. A lot of people don't even know this, don't remember it. It was called GEM, Graphical Environment Management, or some goofy 3 letters. I forget what it was. This was a company that, by the way, could have been Microsoft. The original Digital Research Inc. could have been Microsoft. It's another story there. They said they copied us. And their point that they made is the delight is going to be lost in the mire of a bad execution. People are not going to want to go with the graphical user interface because it's going to be viewed as stodgy, and our reputation is going to get hurt by a bad copy.
Right.
It's like someone in the French cafe trying to copy Sartre, and they say, you're ruining it for us.
Yeah.
So we actually brought a lawsuit, I think, if I'm remembering it right. I wrote a few letters. DRI backed off. They eventually went out of business. But the point is, I said, copyright extends to graphical user interfaces. We registered and got the Copyright Office to approve all of our stuff. We got protection on it. I did a big article called The Copyright and the Look and Feel of Computer Software. It got published all over the place. And people were like, this is amazing. We always thought copyright protected code. It does protect more than code. And so Jobs was able, and the company was able to carry that message that people learn visually, and they learn through pictures and movies. And of course, Jobs famously said, people don't read anymore. I don't know if I go that far. But conceptually, Apple took that message to really what will probably become the future of this AR, VR stuff, although they've not fully embraced it yet. Maybe it's going to happen. But what do you think happens when the industry starts to have the opposite of delight? Because let's take goggles and the way Google's first rollout of Google Glasses failed.
Right.
That's a bad thing, right? It slows the whole industry to some degree, right? Or would you say, no, it opens the door to someone to delight faster?
I think it's the law of who's going to come up with the best way to deliver that delight.
Yes.
And I think in AR and VR, we're not quite there yet.
Yes.
And Glass was, I think, a good experiment, the way I look at it. But it wasn't viable in the sense that the delight delivered wasn't meeting expectations.
But do you think that when a bad version comes out early, the game itself gets corrupted?
I don't think so. Because if somebody comes at the same time with a much better version, then we will forget the old version.
Okay.
So I don't think it slows the adoption of the new technology or the new experience, if you will. I just think it's part of the process to find who's going to win.
Because I'll give an example, and I did this on the last show. I remember when Apple came out with the Newton, which was this handheld, you probably remember.
A lot of misalignments there.
A lot of misalignments there. But
in fact, I actually have a case study in my book about Newton.
Oh, about the Newton. Okay, good. So it's in here. So it's a funny sort of coincidence. I think Apple was doing the right thing because they were learning what they didn't know about the use of a handheld. Now, similarly, and this is where I'm going with this, Samsung comes out with something that, by the way, I saw this, I think it was at Apple, it might have been at some vendor for Apple. I saw a folding version of the iBook, I want to say decades ago, literally decades ago. They never came out with that product. I don't know why, maybe the pricing couldn't have, but here's Samsung coming out with this thing called the Fold. And it's like the beginning of the book is going to look like a book, but electronically. So we all know that's probably coming, and it probably may even be in our lifetime. Hopefully we live to 100 each, maybe beyond. Conceptually, do you think of it as if Samsung fails with the Fold, that's okay because Apple can accelerate on top of them?
Yeah, I think whoever's going to win is going to be the company that delivers that expected experience. Where the delight is there, people see it immediately. You don't have to explain, you don't have to sell it.
Right.
Coming back to the Newton, I think one of the big challenge that the company made was that the technology wasn't quite there. And Steve was extremely patient for the iPod because the hard drive wasn't small enough and it wasn't solid state. So until the hard drive was 1 inch, it was everything else was ready, but it's like we can't do it because the product's going to be too big. So I think in a way, Apple has learned that lesson about patience to make sure that the delight, that the technology can enable that delight and the technology will work and will be ready at a price point that makes sense.
So let me tell you, when I hear what you say, and I've seen parts of the book before. I'm certainly going to read the whole book now because I still like
If you
paper.
can't sleep at night, it's perfect.
It's perfect. I mean, no, but the pictures are beautiful, and you use the beautiful paper. And I have to say, I don't know what it's costing you per unit, but it's a beautiful book. I'll put it up to the camera so people can see it. But I say to myself, most boards of directors that I've been associated, public companies, private companies, startups, there's board members don't even think this way. They're always thinking, let's build the right product, engineering. Let's do the right marketing, marketing. Forget about the product. Let's make distribution work. Forget about that. Delight, they don't even think about delight. They're like, what are the customers saying? Nah, who cares about the customers so long as they pay the bills? I think that you've brought a much more holistic view, and I would probably say there probably is a college for directors course that you should teach on these subjects.
Yeah, I have been toying. I don't know if I'm going to do it, to be honest, but I have been toying with this idea of writing a book on boards of directors, particularly for privately held companies. I've been on 20 boards.
Yes.
And I realized that board members don't really know what their job really is. And you can do the test. You go to a board meeting and you ask every board member, says, can you write on one sentence what is your job as a board member?
Yes.
And I guarantee you, if you have 8 board members, you may have 10 different answers.
Yes.
So I think that board members don't quite necessarily understand what their job is and what they should really do to help the CEO.
Well, most of them will say one of two things, sometimes both. I work for the CEO when in good times, and I fire the CEO in bad times.
Yeah.
That's basically my function. And it's a little bit like the CEO's got to do all this. I'm like in this supervisory role. But the real truth is board members for sure, but I would say all the C-suite team members should realize that if things are not aligned and like a zipper, the zipper really closes. I mean, if it's misaligned, the whole garment's got to be thrown away.
Yeah.
This just happened to me. It was funny. People are like, throw it away. Of course, I come from that Italian family where it's like you fix things before you throw them away. I said, it's got to be fixable. They're like, no, you have to rip the zipper out and then you have to pay for it. I was like, it's got to be fixable. And they're like, no, you throw it away. And of course, I'm thinking, there's got to be. I'll put buttons on it. Like I'm coming up with all these ideas. But conceptually, just one or two teeth being out of alignment and the whole garment might be worth $500. It's got to be thrown away. Or that's what people would say. I would say fix it.
Yeah.
You would say probably fix it.
Yeah. In fact, I have a switch in my bathroom which detects the presence.
Yes.
It goes on and off.
Yes.
And it broke. The little switch broke inside.
Yes.
And so I have a friend who's an electrician, and I said, well, I want to buy the little switch. I open it, and, and he said, well, you can't find that anywhere. Just throw it away.
Yes.
I was like, I'm not throwing it away. The rest of the electronics is working fine.
Yes.
Of course, I went to Fry's just before they closed. They don't have the switch.
Yes.
So, but
luckily Fry's was still there because I hear they're going out of business,
it was just before they closed. Well,
right.
But luckily, I took a magnifier and I looked at this little switch and I was able to measure it because there was nothing written on it.
Yes.
But I found it on the internet. I ordered like 5 of them.
Yes.
It cost like 40 cents. And I soldered it back on the
circuit
board.
Good for
and
you.
It's working fine. And it's going to work for another 10 years.
See, that's beautiful.
So,
of course, your wife was like, that cost us the equivalent at your consulting rate as like $5,000.
Yeah, but
right?
The point is that you're right. We're throwing way too many things. We don't try to fix. We don't try to understand.
Yes.
And it was a great project. I enjoyed it, actually.
But do you think that CEOs will embrace this more holistic approach, or will they tell you, our company leans engineering or our company leans marketing? I mean, I think you would say Apple's got kind of the right holistic, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but I would almost think at some level to be an Apple, you really have to do all these things right given the competition. Mm-hmm. But do you think that a lot of companies tend to lean more on one axis versus another, and they lose something in their valuation as a result?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think that I would encourage any CEO and any board member to look at this framework and to look at this new concept.
Yes.
And ask themselves, how well is my company or my business aligned with this target market along each of those 4 axes?
Yes.
And it will give them a very different perspective. They're going to look at it through a new set of lenses, and they're going to look at it very differently because they never thought about it this way before.
Okay.
The second thing is, I think the current way companies are organized in terms of engineering and customer success and support and marketing and sales, I think maps actually fairly well with the 4 axes. In fact, I have a chapter, the last chapter of the book is about the internal alignment, which is critical as well. And it maps the organization and the functions with those 4 axes. So I am not inviting to completely rethink about the structure of the companies. I think the structure we have is good enough.
Yes.
But I am inviting the thinking about, product and customers and customer success and pricing differently based on this new approach.
Okay. So last part I have is you actually have a business that you've grown yourself, your consulting business, you go into these companies that are misaligned and you try to figure out where the cancer is, right? I'm using a medical term here.
I mean, we basically, the other powerful thing behind this alignment concept is that you can measure each of those 4 alignments from 0 to 100%.
Okay.
And so we've developed tools, and some of the tools are actually exposed in the book. So I encourage people to look at them and apply them if they think it's relevant.
Okay.
But we wanted to measure with a number how well the company is aligned along each of those 4 axes. Now, by virtue of measuring, you extract insights. Now you understand why you're not as aligned. And based on those insights, we put together, or the company can put together, a growth playbook. So it's an action plan that will tell them exactly what to do. There won't be any question on why, because they measure it. They know why they are misaligned. They know what they need to do.
Yes.
And then if they start to implement that on Monday morning at 8 o'clock, they're going to start to grow faster and they're going to start to beat their competition.
So do you think there's a version of this? I always think in this higher and then lower way, let's go higher, where governments can think about the services they apply to do measurement along these different axes as well? Because I think the U.S. now is delivering poorly a lot of services badly at a very high tax cost or tax
very
cost.
expensively.
It's expensive, and it seems like there's a lot of misalignment. Do you think you can apply the same thing at like a higher level, a government level?
Yeah, I think the only difference is that there is no pricing, there is no money exchange, right? So, there is somewhere, but it's not immediate, it's not obvious.
Yes.
But I think that if you're government offering a service, then you should be able to define the pain and the claim. You should be able to express what that service is going to do for you and why you need it. You should be able to deliver it easily. And then you should be able to make sure that the people enjoying that service are happy and they are delighted and that it does what they were expected it to do.
Right. So this could become something that becomes a new way to measure the CEO, the president, how well are you doing, delivering on the promise and making the pay and the claim match each other and so on. We don't do that in America. I don't know any government does. Maybe someone told me Estonia has e-government and maybe they're doing more of that electronically. But here in the U.S., it seems like we don't do such a good job on it.
Yeah, because I think the notion of delight and the notion of government services just don't go well together.
Weird,
which I think is a mistake.
Right. So then going one step lower, let's take a household. It's sort of arguably not a business, but it's a set of human activities that are trying to organize. Do you think there's a version of this that you could say is aligning the dots in a household?
I'm not sure, because you align those 8 dots, 2 dots per axis. You align them with the goal to sell more. At the end of the day, you're increasing the top line growth rate. I'm not sure what the top line growth rate is.
Well, it would be the experience in the household of feeling that you're living a life together. It wouldn't be money. The metric would be some sort of joy.
Happiness level,
right? So conceptually, because I know there are people like Dr. John Gottman at the University of Washington in Seattle that say, we haven't yet come up with a set of metrics, but we should, because he was a mathematician years ago, then he converted to being a therapist. Major transformation for him and his wife, and he runs a clinic for couples in trouble. And I often think, if you go 1 degree lower, a lot of times there's a misalignment between the couple about, well, what are our life goals together? And it's like I look at Melania and I look at, Donnie, Donald Trump, and I think, God, are they aligned or misaligned? She's beautiful. He's what he is, I hate to get political, but conceptually, that's a family, and they're living in a White House, and they're running a government, and it's pretty funny to even think about. But there's misalignments, right?
Oh, for sure, yes, So I don't know if the axis in the household example would be the same. They may be different. I'm thinking of internal alignment, which is the next kind of big frontier, if you will, because if the organization is not internally aligned, then the external alignment between the company and the market won't be won't be achieved.
Yes.
And so the next question, I think, is what does that mean? What are the axes of alignment to define an organization that's well aligned? And I don't know what they are yet, but that's kind of the next step, if you will, of that process.
So last question I have for you is, when someone reads a book and they see a heading, Aligning the Dots, the new paradigm to grow any business, and the word any I keep emphasizing, and they say to themselves, but I'm a startup. I'm not really even at the point of worrying because my team is under 10. Would you say that's stupid? You got to start thinking about this stuff even right now?
I think they have to start thinking about it the moment they have an idea of starting a company.
Yes.
Because you have to really force yourself to define that pain, even though you have no customer, no product, no revenue, no market, nothing.
Yes.
You have to be able to articulate what pain are you going after, and who has that pain, which is the definition of your market.
Yes.
And then what is the unique claim you're going to make against that pain? If that is not defined in the founders' heads, then they will be a struggle, because it's like they don't quite know who they are, and they may eventually find who they are, by chance, by luck. But to me, I would encourage any entrepreneur, as soon as they have an idea, to start looking at those 4 axes and say, okay, how will we align the business along those 4 axes? I think it's critical.
Because you're almost saying the job of the VC is to either screen out or help that team see that what they're going to get to is a point where they have to deliver on all those metrics.
Yes.
And if the VC or super angel or angel doesn't see the team understanding that mission, they're going to say, look, you're an engineering company. Why don't you just go into consulting engineering services? That's really what you're doing. You're not really delivering a product.
Yeah, because the learning curve is very, very steep.
Yes, yes.
But I give you an example. I meet a lot of CEOs and entrepreneurs, and I used to ask them, well, what does your company do?
Yes.
They never fail to answer that question. In fact, they go on and explain it to me, and I have to stop them because we're at the party. I want to meet other people.
Yes.
And I said, by the way, I'm not going to buy your cybersecurity on the cloud product. I'm not a prospect.
Yes.
So I stop asking that question, and I ask a very different question, and I say, I don't know who you are, I don't know what you're doing, but can you tell me in one sentence, why should I buy your product?
Yes.
Very different question.
Yes.
And you can do the test, actually, and you'll be amazed that I found that a number of CEOs are unable to answer that question.
Scary.
They can tell you for an hour what they are doing and why it's the best thing on the planet.
Yes.
But they cannot tell you, and they cannot articulate why they should buy, which tells me that the pain versus claim alignment is not there.
Yes.
Right from the get-go.
Right. And that's an immediate strike, you're out kind of thing, right? And a lot of, when I talk to a lot of people, they're often like, I just know if I build it, they will buy it. And that's a leap of faith, right? It's
huge.
You have to have an iterative process. You have to do experimentation. You have to have a sense. Of course, it takes money or savings or friends and family to make that happen, right?
Yeah, but I think you've got to strive to try to understand those 4 alignments from the very, very beginning. It has to be embedded in the DNA of the company.
So when people read this book, and I'm sure some will, and say, man, I've got to get Philippe into my company to look at what's going on because I know it could be better. Is there a screening test you use? Because I know you're not cheap. The book is relatively expensive, right?
The book's like
$20?
$26. Yeah.
How much?
$26.
$26, and I think on Kindle it's far cheaper too.
Yeah,
really
Kindle
far
is
cheaper.
$4.99.
Yeah, $5 on Kindle. I mean, you can't beat that, right?
Yeah. Well, we work with companies that are at least $10 million in revenue.
Okay.
Because a lot of data analysis we do, they have to have enough data.
Yes.
So a company below 10 million is not quite a company yet, in my opinion. They're an adolescent.
That's a small client. That's a small client for you.
And our largest customers are over $1 billion in revenue.
Yes. And so you can go in, and that's a big range that you can cover.
Yeah.
Small company, 10 million, company, $1 billion. That's a big, I take it you must have a team.
Yeah, and the company that has $1 billion, we may work with one of their division that's like 50 or $150 million. The real sweet spot for us is the low end of the mid-market, so $20 to $150 million.
I'm curious, what is the typical time frame to get some results back? Is it months or years?
No,
or
so at the end of the day, we deliver the growth playbook, this operating plan based on our analysis and the measurement and based on our methodology.
Okay.
And it takes anywhere from 12 to 20 weeks to get
fast,
it. Yeah.
Right?
We try to be very efficient because the CEO and the management team, they want to align as quickly as possible. They want to know where they are misaligned. They want to get answers.
Yes.
And we're not there to spend 6 months trying to figure it out. They need an answer fairly quickly.
Right. So how do people reach you if they're interested, besides going to Amazon, which is the major bookseller these days?
Yeah, so they can go on my website, which is philippebouissou.com.
Okay.
Or they can go to bluedotspartners.com, which is the firm that I'm co-managing with my partner.
So Blue Dots, like BLUEDOTS, partners.com. And then Philippe Bouissou, your name is just the French, PHILIPPEBOUISSOU.
Right.
.com.
That's correct.
But do you have a shorter one for the book, like success.com? Or
they can go to aligninthedots.com as well.
Aligninthedots.com.
Yeah, that will redirect them to my website.
Excellent. So that's perfect. And so any of those places, you also have an email address.
Yeah, they'll find me.
They'll find you. And you're in LinkedIn.
I'm on LinkedIn, obviously.
And you're on LinkedIn as well. And I have to tell you, you have to read this book because it will give you a new way to holistically think about growing a business. I'm more than happy to answer questions that people have about what I think works for businesses. You've given me a new structure to think about. So I'm Jack Russo at Computer Law. It's Jack at computerlaw.com, 650-327-9800. I won't ask people to give out your phone number because you might get barraged with phone calls, but you've been a great guest. I will let people know more about the book. I will probably buy a bunch of them when you actually have your first book signing. You've given me a pre-signed version, but when is that? Is that
the
coming
book
up?
will be published on February 26th.
Nice, beautiful. So 2 weeks after Valentine's Day.
Yep.
And you're gonna have a little book party somewhere where you take over Wrigley Field or something, right?
Yes, we're gonna do a book party at the middle of March.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Jack. It's been a pleasure.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Very good. Bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.